And when I first stepped into the recruitment office, I never imagined how much of my military life would be spent in the dark. Quite literally, we were constantly rising before dawn, operating deep into the night. I never looked up the origin of the word reveille, but it might as well have meant get up when it's pitch black. Working in total darkness, you learn to appreciate the value of vision-enhancing gear. Night vision goggles, NODs or NVGs, became our second pair of eyes. The first time I wore a pair, it felt like entering a surreal game world. The world turned green and grainy, like watching a dream unfold through a dirty lens. We typically used one optic over the non-dominant eye, letting the other stay natural. Eventually, the brain adapts, blending both views into something semi-coherent. Still, prolonged use distorts your perception. You start to question what you're seeing. Is that a shape, a shadow, or something else entirely? Modern night vision tech has come a long way after decades of refinement. But during the Vietnam War, things were far from stable. Soldiers back then used prototypes, experimental goggles with red-tinted displays, and, allegedly, something far more unusual. A strange chemical compound was added, dianine. Originally created to explore the human body's aura, dianine wasn't just for science. When it was combined with military-grade lenses, something happened. Something they weren't prepared for. This is the account of what's become known as the demonic goggles incident. Before diving into the meat of this story, consider this metaphor. A caged bird staring through two metal bars, seemingly trapped, despite the cage being open behind it. That bird, in many ways, was me, trapped by a facade I'd built. The military taught me discipline, yes, but it also taught me to conceal, to present a version of myself that didn't show weakness. I wore a mask, emotionally and literally. But that version of me started to change as I embraced vulnerability, and, strange as it sounds, it made me more open to experiences. And the uncanny stories others shared, it's in that spirit of openness that I ask you now. Suspend your disbelief. You are about to enter the fog. Long before Vietnam, there was a British medical electrician named Walter John Kilner. In the late 1800s, while working at St. Thomas's Hospital in London, Kilner became obsessed with a theory, a glowing field of energy that surrounded living beings. Not a soul, not a ghost, but an electromagnetic field. Inspired by the ideas of German scientist Karl von Reichenbach, Kilner aimed to see this aura with his own eyes. His experiments led him to create what became known as Kilner screens, glass slides treated with chemical dyes, specifically one called dianine. When light passed through these slides, it revealed faint, glowing outlines around human bodies, what he believed to be an aura. He even developed goggles using this compound, allowing the user to supposedly view these emanations more clearly. However, the results came at a cost. Prolonged exposure to dianine was hazardous, causing vision problems and headaches. Kilner warned others, use the goggles sparingly. Despite the dangers, his work gained temporary popularity, particularly among spiritualists desperate to prove life after death. Over time, science discredited his claims. Critics accused him of optical illusions, placebo effects, and pseudoscience. Kilner died in 1920, and with him, most of the interest in his aura-detecting lenses faded away. Or so we thought. Fast forward to the 1960s. U.S. forces were deep in the jungles of Vietnam, facing an enemy that thrived in darkness. The North Vietnamese Army used the night as a weapon, conducting ambushes and moving troops under moonlight while Americans struggled to navigate thick foliage with poor visibility. The military had developed a new kind of night vision, passive optics. Unlike previous models, which required infrared spotlights, these new devices amplified ambient light, moonlight, starlight. One such optic was the Starlight Scope, first fielded in 1967. It changed warfare, but it also changed perception. Everything seen through it was green and surreal. Jungle creatures became monsters. Rocks looked like soldiers. Stress and exhaustion blurred reality. The jungle wasn't just deadly. It looked like another world entirely. But this is where the story takes a darker turn. A Vietnam veteran named Cliff H. shared a story passed down by his father, a high-ranking officer who served multiple tours in country. During one of those tours, his unit was chosen to test a new kind of goggle, a prototype designed to allow helicopter crews to fly and fight in total darkness. These weren't the standard green spectrum goggles. They were filtered through red lenses. Supposedly, red was chosen because it didn't strain the human eye as much. In theory, the red spectrum would allow pilots to detect heat and movement with better clarity. But these goggles weren't just filtered. They were also chemically enhanced that Cliff's father never confirmed it outright. But the story suggests the lenses were treated with dianine, that same compound Kilner had once used to see the aura. Whether the military knew this or not, the effect it produced was immediate and horrifying. The first night the goggles were deployed, chaos erupted. Cliff's father was on a routine flight over rural South Vietnam, supervising the test. The gunners on board had been given the new red-tinted goggles. Visibility was decent, calm skies. Then suddenly, one of the gunners opened fire, not at the ground, but at empty space beside the chopper. His .50 cal rounds barely missed the nearby aircraft, flying in formation, shouting over the engine noise. Cliff's father rushed to stop the gunner. He yanked the goggles off the man's face, only to find him trembling, wide-eyed, in shock. When he asked what the hell he was firing at, the gunner answered with one word: demons. He claimed to see winged, grotesque figures soaring beside the helicopter, pointing directly at him, reaching for him. He shot out of sheer panic. Initially, command assumed the gunner was high. Drug use was rampant among troops, after all. But this wasn't a case of heroin or amphetamines. The gunner showed none of the signs. Over the following weeks, more soldiers tested the goggles. More sightings occurred. Every crew that wore the red lenses reported terrifying visions. Some saw clawed entities jumping from trees. Others described shadowy beings prowling the jungle floor, watching from beneath the canopy. These weren't quick hallucinations. They were clear, detailed, and haunting. Morale plummeted. Soldiers became afraid to fly. Cliff's father eventually forbade the use of the goggles altogether. But before ending the program, he decided to test them himself. What he described to Cliff haunted him for the rest of his life. Wearing the goggles, the world turned hellish. The red tint warped the landscape into a vision of some gothic underworld. But worse still, as he looked out across the tree line near their firebase, he saw things. Figures. Shapes that moved. Winged creatures with glowing eyes and jagged limbs. Perched on the treetops, watching. He ripped the goggles off and saw nothing. Just the fog. Just silence. That experiment was shut down within 60 days. No official report. No documentation. Just whispered memories passed down from father to son. Skeptics argue that Cliff's story is fiction. And maybe it is. But oddly enough, his account mirrors dozens of verified testimonies from Vietnam-era soldiers using the green spectrum starlight scopes. In 2017, the U.S. Naval Academy published a study titled The Secret of Seeing Charlie in the Dark. It explored the psychological toll of night optics. Soldiers reported seeing moving plants, monstrous reptiles, dragons, and even corpses that weren't there in the morning. The scope didn't just reveal the enemy. It created them. Even without chemical enhancements, staring through artificial eyes in a hostile jungle, while exhausted and sleep-deprived, broke many men's minds. Some described the view as snowing ghosts. Others couldn't tell the difference between tree branches and advancing enemies. One medic said he spent hours watching dozens of dead bodies littered across a field, only to realize in daylight that no battle had occurred at all. As someone who's personally spent days in recon training without sleep, I can tell you, the mind plays tricks. I once spoke to a guy I thought was on my team, until I realized he vanished the moment I blinked. He never existed. Were the visions soldiers saw through the red goggles simply amplified hallucinations? Maybe, but consider this. Kilner believed the human body emits invisible energy. He used dianine to expose it. Modern science confirms we exist on a spectrum of light and frequency far beyond what our eyes can detect. Infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves, they're all real. We just can't see them without tools. Is it possible, then, that some goggles, green, red, or otherwise, don't just create illusions, but open a window into a realm we weren't meant to observe? No one knows for sure whether the red goggles were part of a real military experiment. But we do know this. Soldiers in Vietnam saw things they couldn't explain. Not just once, but night after night. And if even one of those sightings wasn't a hallucination, then what the hell was out there in the dark?